Is it possible to feel completely alone in a room full of people? Absolutely. There are actually 35 people per every square mile of the Earth's surface. We have people all around us every day, but yet many youth feel profoundly isolated. If this is how you feel, then we hope today's episode will encourage you. Hello, I'm Joshua Farthing, Victory Leaders Band Coordinator and host of Greater Things. On October 1st of last year, the Victory Leaders Band released a short video about feeling isolated and not being able to connect with other youth. So coming up on today's episode, we will discuss the issue in greater depth. Our special guests are two regional youth leaders, Autumn Anderson of Minnesota and Tim Osborne of Alaska. They will be joining us via Skype. Also, local youth leader of the Zion Hill Church in Cleveland, Tennessee, Amy Anders, will join us here in the studio. But first, I'm going to send you over to Ashley for GT News.
Welcome to GT News. I'm Ashley Wertheiser. We begin with a report from Brazil, where the VOB department is active and growing. On a recent trip by Brother Hawkins and Brother Noe Solis, they were able to meet one of their newest members, Sister Firmino. She was excited to share her experience.
Bom, assim, meu testemunho, que Deus fez na minha vida,
I'm making a testimony of what God has done in my life.
é que Deus me resgatou do pecado, do lamaçal do pecado,
That the Lord has cleaned me from all my sins.
me formou uma nova pessoa,
He made me a new person.
e eu quis ser membro para mostrar para todos que eu sou capaz de fazer tudo que eu sou capaz de fazer pela Igreja de Deus.
And I became a member because I want to do everything possible I can do for the Church of God.
Eu sou muito grata por isso,
And I'm very grateful for that.
e na Igreja de Deus foi onde eu cresci, e vou envelhecer aqui e irei morrer aqui.
And the Church of God is where I grew up, where I want to be, and where I want to die.
Pois aqui me sinto muito feliz do que no mundo.
And I feel very happy here, and I don't want to be in the world.
E espero que todos jovens, todo mundo possam também ser um dia um membro da Igreja de Deus.
And I hope all the youth around the world can also be part of the Church of God.
Porque aqui é uma escola de aprendizagem para a pessoa se edificar mais e mais na palavra de Deus.
Because this is the school where we can learn more and more about the Lord.
E aqui eu aprendi coisas que eu nunca pensei que eu fosse aprender.
And I have learned things I never imagined I was going to learn.
E aqui, juntando todas as igrejas, não tem como como é que se diz? As regras da igreja é diferente das outras.
And I know and I have learned that the church is different than any other church.
E se eu fiz o pacto,
And I made a covenant
eu vou cumprir com a palavra que Deus
because
mandou.
I want to fulfill the word of God that He has given us.
Irei viver na palavra do Novo Testamento
And to live accordingly to the New Testament
e irei sair pregando o evangelho nos quatro cantos da terra.
and be able to walk on it.
Que se Deus me trouxe aqui com um propósito,
If God brought me here with a purpose,
eu irei cumprir.
and I want to fulfill.
Amém.
Amen.
It's that time of year again for youth conventions and retreats. Alaska, March 31st through April 2nd. Florida and Georgia, April 7th through the 9th. Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin, April 7th and 8th. Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Kansas, April 14th and 15th. Tennessee, April 14th and 15th. Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan, April 22nd. Mississippi and Louisiana, April 28th and 29th. Virginia and West Virginia, April 28th and 29th. Alabama, May 5th and 6th. North Carolina, May 12th through the 13th. Additional dates will be posted to the Victory Leaders Band page as they become available. The General Coordinator, Joshua Farthing, is asking for everyone to show their support by participating in these events. You can send us news from these and other events to gt@thechurchofgod.org. There's an evangelistic campaign coming up July 18th through the 27th in the state of Washington, led by Rob and Amy Montgomery. This is a great opportunity for training and ministry. If you're interested in taking part in this exciting experience, please call or text the Montgomerys at 330-285-0681. In other news, the Victory Leaders Band would like to encourage all who can to attend the Cleveland School of Bible Training Institute, May 28th through June 10th. Bible Training Institute is devoted to training people in the foundations of the Word of God. This training includes courses on doctrine, business, effective auxiliary ministry, personal evangelism, and many other topics. Check the BTI website for more information and an application. Would you like to see your youth group featured in GT News? Send us a report of your event along with a link for your video to vlb@thechurchofgod.org. It may be featured on an upcoming episode of Greater Things. This has been the news for today, and we're looking forward to greater things.
Join us in the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, August 18th through August 21st for International Youth Camp. This $148 3-night and 4-day retreat includes 9 meals, lodging, and a relaxed atmosphere. You will also receive valuable instruction relevant to today's camping ministry. You will make lots of friends from around the world and, of course, have lots of fun. Visit our website and download an application today.
Welcome back. As youth transition from childhood to adulthood, they begin to compare themselves with those around them, ultimately to find where they fit in. It's a difficult process, and for many youth, it's often a lonely one. Take a look at the video that was released in October. In 1951, researchers at McGill University paid a group of male graduate students to stay in small chambers equipped with only a bed for an experiment on sensory deprivation. They wore goggles and earphones to limit their sense of sight and hearing, and gloves to limit their sense of touch. The plan was to observe students for 6 weeks, but not one lasted more than 7 days. The point of this story is that God created us to be social, and He even said that it's not good for us to be alone. Someone once asked, "What's the biggest problem teens face today?" The response was, they feel profoundly isolated. In the Church of God, we have youth all over the world. Some areas have a higher concentration of youth than in other areas, and if you're in a church or area that don't have many youth, then you can understand how difficult it is to feel connected with other youth who are in the same church and serve the same God. Author Andy Brainer once asked young people to complete this sentence: "I feel most lonely when." Some of the answers youth gave were, when I'm left out of a group of friends, when something bad happens and I feel like God has deserted me, when I feel like I have no one to talk to about my struggles, when no one is there to help me when life gets tough, and finally, I feel most lonely when I am in a crowd. We hope to cover some of these issues on today's episode. I would like to welcome our first special guest, Regional Youth Coordinator, Autumn Anderson of Minnesota. Autumn, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you, Josh. It's awesome to be here. It's an honor.
We're glad that you're here. Can you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and the region in which you are a coordinator?
Yes. So I'm Autumn Anderson. I am regional coordinator for Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. So we have 4 states, but there are only 2 churches in those 4 states, 2 churches and 1 mission.
Oh, wow. Well, today on the show, we're talking about isolation and feeling disconnected from other youth. And that's one reason why we want to have you on the show today is, for that reason, you're saying that you have 2 churches and 1 mission in a region of 4 states, which is a large region. Yeah. So can you tell me how close is the nearest church to where you're at right now in Minnesota?
Yeah, so the mission is in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and that is about 4.5 hours away from us. And then the church is in Isabel, South Dakota, and that's almost 8 hours away.
How many young people do you think are in the 2 churches and 1 mission?
Well, the church in Minnesota is by far the biggest for young people. It's my husband and I, and then my 5 siblings. But then other than that, the mission in Sioux Falls only has 1 guy that's in VLB age. And then in Isabel, there's just a couple VLB age because the rest of them moved off to college. So it's pretty much the Minnesota church is where all the youth is at.
So Autumn, what are some of the difficulties that you may face as a leader, knowing that the distance may create a disadvantage?
Yeah, the biggest disadvantage is how far our churches are apart. So like I mentioned earlier, the closest mission to us is 4.5 hours. So it's not like, oh, our church 30 minutes down the road is having a youth event. Let's go and support them. It takes preparation and taking days off work and driving and getting a hotel. It's so complicated. And the biggest thing is your reality is your surroundings. Whatever you are surrounded by every day, that's your reality. And the Lord has blessed mightily in the Church of God with lots of youth groups in different areas. And so sometimes they take it for granted. You go to church, that's just how it's always been. You have friends at church, you look forward to it. But you forget that there's people like us in Minnesota that don't have that. And what you take for granted, we're praying and asking God to bless us with. And so that's a big thing, is to keep our minds focused on, even though this is our reality, what are other people's realities? And Lord, how can you use us? Maybe if you are the ones that have a big youth group, maybe as a youth group you can pray, Lord, lay a church on our heart that doesn't have a whole lot of youth and help us to know what we can do. Maybe we can go on a mission trip and go to that church just to be encouraging to them. Or maybe we can keep in correspondence with them, to reach out. And so that's the biggest thing, is if the Lord's blessed you with a huge youth group, praise the Lord. But don't just sit on it. Use that to reach out to people like us in Minnesota that don't have youth and that we wish so bad we did.
Right. So it seems like, I guess over the years, y'all have had to just try to make some adjustments and, just do the best you can, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's all we can do. And we try to, now with having 4 younger siblings, I try real hard to be there for them and have activities for them so they don't have to grow up like I did, all by myself. But a huge thing is traveling, and we'll probably get into this, but traveling to other churches in different regions and meeting youth to know that, okay, even though I'm all by myself out here in Minnesota, there still are youth in the church, that I can reach out to and talk to over the phone. Yeah, it would be awesome to be in person, but next best thing is the phone or Skype, or something like that.
I feel like it's very important that we still try to keep them involved. Just as you were saying, have activities for them, even though they're maybe just, 2 or 3, but it's still important to keep them involved. And I like how you are doing that. Yeah. So one other thing is, and this is really the final question I have for you, is there anything that you would recommend or any advice or something that maybe that y'all do that you feel like it helps and it works for the viewers who are watching today that may feel disconnected?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was thinking about that, BTI is huge. When I went to BTI, I got to meet so many different people and get contacts with them and be able to keep in touch with them. And then when you go to the assembly every year, you get to see them and you feel like, you have friends out in the world, that have the same mindset as you. Also, IYC was amazing. And you got to meet so many people, even overseas. Like I got to meet overseers overseas that you wouldn't be able to meet just on a normal church event, and that's super helpful. Also, what we've done personally in Minnesota is connected with churches that record their services and then they send us the DVDs. So we'll get together as a church and we'll watch the DVD, or we'll get together as a church and listen to the message on the CD as our, Bible study or as our service. Because until this year, we've been without a pastor for a little while. And so it's been hard, but you have to dig in for yourself and be committed. And that's the main thing I think of, because at BTI, when there's tons of people around, you get so excited and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this when I get home. I'm going to do this. And then you get home and you're all by yourself and you don't have that motivation. It's hard. But if you just keep yourself tapped in, and greater things is amazing. And this is such an awesome outlet for the church. And I'm excited to see what God's going to do through this.
Yes. So it's very important to do all that you can to be involved. Like you mentioned, BTI, General Assembly, all those things are very important to be involved in, put yourself in. And I think those are great things in order to keep yourself encouraged and a good way to keep yourself feeling connected, Sister Autumn, we appreciate you being on the show here today. We thank you very much for your time, and we pray that you just have a good year, a year full of growth, and pray that the Lord would just bless you with many young people up there in Minnesota. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It is not too early to start planning your events for Youth Emphasis Week, April the 23rd through the 29th. This week of activities and encouragement is dedicated to the ministry of all youth around the world, so go ahead and plan a special outing or take initiative to start a new project. It's a great opportunity to be creative, have lots of fun, and reiterate the importance of being a follower of Christ. Whatever your inspiration may be, there is no better time than Youth Emphasis Week.
We also have joining with us via Skype from Anchorage, Alaska, the Regional Youth Coordinator, Tim Osborne. Brother Tim, it's good to have you on the show with us today, brother.
Hey, Brother Josh, it's good to be here.
I had went online and just wanted to check it out. So I typed in what it would take for me to drive from Cleveland, Tennessee, to to Anchorage, Alaska, and it showed me that I would have to drive over 4,000 miles. So that tells me that you are a long way from us here in Cleveland.
We sure are.
Alaska is way up there.
Yeah, it's a long ways away. We've actually made the drive for the assembly and back. Really? It was a fur piece of a drive.
I can imagine.
Larry.
So really, just want to tell you that today's episode we're talking about feeling isolated and disconnected, and that's why we want to bring you on today, because we know that Alaska is just kind of up there by itself, and we know that there's just a couple of churches that we have there in Alaska.
Correct.
So we want to bring you on and get your input on some things here. But first of all, does your distance ever give you the feeling of being disconnected from the rest of the church?
Well, sure it does. For myself, especially whenever I first got saved back in 2000 and joined the church shortly thereafter, I was a single man, and the pastor at that time and his family, shortly after I came into the church, left for another state to go pastor somewhere else, and they left us without a pastor, and so there was an interim there where I didn't have a pastor. Brother Grant at that time and his family were living in Cordova, which is where we had a third church at that time, which is no longer there. That was before they came to Anchorage, and so Brother Grant had appointed me as pastor to take care of the church here in Anchorage for about a year and a half. And it was just me and Sister Pauline Craver, an elderly woman, sister that is in Texas now. And so, yeah, absolutely. At that time, I felt disconnected from the church because there was no young people here in Anchorage. The closest young people were in Bethel. And Bethel is 397 air miles from here. You can only fly in and out of there. You can't drive there. You probably could snow machine, but I don't think it's legal.
Yeah, it'd be hard to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you probably could do a sled dog if you wanted to, but I wouldn't even know where to start with that. But yeah, needless to say, I felt isolated and disconnected because of that, simply because I was a single man, didn't have my wife then, and there was no young people near me.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that you being that far away from the rest of the church and just only having a few there at your local church, that it presented some challenges. So
Sure.
That's what I want to really ask you right now is, what challenges do you or your youth right now face because of this distance?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I was saying, it wasn't really an issue for me after I got married. And of course, I got kids now, and the church has changed a lot. Like we've had quite a few people, transplants, as we call them in the church, right?
Yeah.
People that have moved up here and stuff like that, and we've grown to some extent. And most of our church now is young people, which is great.
Right. That's right.
But even still, there are some. I can imagine among us still, especially those that are single and haven't found their mate yet, that probably at times feel isolated and disconnected to some extent. But really, I would say especially for those that aren't from Alaska originally. So like those that didn't start out here but came up because their parents, come to minister or moved because of a job or military, what have you. I can definitely see that being an issue because you're in unfamiliar territory and you don't have that network of friends and family that you had back home, so to speak. And so that's definitely a unique challenge that I can see that would be something that different ones would experience. But yeah, I mean, it's always hard whenever you're starting in a new place. I'm from here, and so I have a network of friends and family, like I was saying, but I've lived in other places also and faced that same thing. That even though there was other young people around me, I didn't really know them that well. And I'm an outgoing person, extroverted, you would say. But we have young people that are the opposite. My wife is the opposite, even though she's a first grade school teacher. I don't know how you can be introverted and be a first grade school teacher, but
Yeah.
She manages. That's her personality. But we have young people that are like that, and so I could see that being a challenge right there. That even though you're surrounded with people, we all know that you can be in a crowded room and still feel lonely, and still feel isolated and disconnected. And so,
Right,
that's definitely a topic that is important that we address, because the enemy would love nothing more than to come and put that feeling of disconnectedness in all of our hearts.
Right.
If we'll let him.
That's something. Well, there was one thing that Autumn Anderson had mentioned earlier on the show was she really saw the importance of trying to keep the young people involved, get them to BTI, to the General Assembly, International Youth Camp. She really emphasized that because that's really all that they had outside of their little youth group. That's all the connection they had with the rest of the church and the rest of the youth in the church. I thought that was great, and
I can identify with that absolutely. Yeah, I can identify with that totally, because that was kind of like my lifeline, if you will, at the beginning there. For many years I didn't miss an assembly, and I felt like I had to be there. For that very purpose. And BTI, I went 5 years in a row. Went to IOIC a few years in a row because we didn't have any other youth that met the criteria or really wanted to go. And so I had the opportunity to go. And man, it made all the difference at the beginning there. So I totally, relate with that.
So how
Absolutely.
many youth do you have right now in your local church?
Well, I mean, so, obviously we have a church in Bethel, but Anchorage here, and most of our families and our young people are actually out in the valley, which is Palmer, Wasilla area, and we have one in Eagle River, so outside of Anchorage here, and they all come in on Sunday. So really we just have one youth group, and, I haven't really added the numbers recently because ever since the Adams got here, but I'd say probably... Well, that's kind of, I should have that number, but I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'm not a numbers guy when it comes to some things.
Oh, so you mentioned that some of them live down in the valley and in various places, and they all come in on Sunday. So even throughout the week, they're a good distance from each other throughout the week. Is that right?
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to bring up a little bit later, possibly, because... like I said, most of our families are young couples that have been married under 10 years. Most of them do live out in the valley. I think really the only young couple, the LB couple, if you will, is my wife and I here in Anchorage. So most of those guys we only see once a week. And right now we're not having a service on Wednesday because of pastor's schedule got changed up, and even when we were having it, it was only like just pastor and his wife, Sister Jenna, and then Becky and I and our two boys. So we're not even doing Wednesday night services right now. So yeah, we really only see each other once a week. So that's definitely a challenge too, because I mean, you're looking forward to seeing, your friends all week, and then you get that short window of time to spend with them, and so you make the most out of it.
Right. And could you just tell us what advice that maybe you can offer to the viewers today who may feel disconnected, because they don't have any youth nearby, or maybe they're at a small church that, the next nearest church is hours away. What advice can you offer the viewers?
It's a great question, Josh. It's something that we, all contend with, whether we're married or not, or whether we have people around us or not. It comes down to our feelings and our emotions. And, like we said earlier, you could be in a crowded room and still feel isolated and disconnected. And so we know based on that right there that, what we really need to deal with, first of all, is our emotions and our feelings. And it's really a spiritual matter. And so, I mean, obviously that's the spiritual answer, but I have found in my walk with the Lord, and it's kind of funny because I was always convinced that once I got married that certain things would disappear, that basically would be a solve all. But as you've probably experienced, there's still things that you have to wrestle with, and our emotions and our feelings are some of those things. And so what I would say, my advice to those that are feeling disconnected and feeling isolated is in those times, run to the Lord.
Yes.
Cast your burdens upon him. Cast your cares upon him. Do what like A.J. Tomlinson did back when God revealed the church to him. Engage your heart to approach unto the Lord, because in his presence is fullness of joy, and we know that the joy of the Lord is our strength. And the times where I felt the closest to the Lord were the times that, man, nothing could interrupt, what I was feeling. And what I was feeling was joy and peace. So that would be my first thing to say. And it doesn't get more practical than that, really, when you boil it down. But secondly, I would encourage them to be the answer or the solution, rather, to the feeling of being isolated and disconnected with other young people. Because, I mean, if you're feeling and experiencing these things, you can be sure that there's people around you that are going through the same exact thing.
Right, somebody else.
Exactly, yeah. Always the case. And there's always someone that's going through something harder than you. And so be the solution, be the answer. Now, you can make that even more practical and pray for that. Pray that God would send you someone, send you, a person that you can minister to. It's more blessed to give than to receive. I'll give us an example here. My best friend Larry Waloya, some of you may, know him or heard of him before. He's not in the church now, and we're still working with him. We're not giving up on him by any means. But when he first moved to Anchorage from Bethel, him and his mom, they moved right across the street from my mom and I, and my brother, who's gone now. But and I didn't know this at the time when I first met him, but he was praying. He was asking the local church here to pray that God would send him a friend, because he had nobody, because he had just moved from Bethel. They didn't know anybody, back to what we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. And he was praying, and he asked God to send somebody. And we move in. He starts coming over and befriending us, right?
Yes.
I was very uncomfortable with it, because, he was like a light bulb when he came in the room, and I was living in darkness, so I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I remember trying to push him away, but he would come over every day and would try to befriend me and my brother. I ended up going down to Washington and getting saved through my uncle Tom, who was in the Church of God down there. Long story short, I'll fill in the details later if you ask me. But
sure.
The point I'm trying to get at here is God answered his prayer. God absolutely moved mountains, if you will, because I was a hard case. And I know that it wasn't just because of Larry's prayers that God saved me and brought me back to Alaska, because my intention was to stay in Washington for the long run. I had no intention of coming back to Alaska for many reasons. But here I am, and God saved me, and we're best friends to this very day. So what I would say is to begin to be very intentional with what you're praying for, mm-hmm. what you're asking for. God right. is a prayer answering God, but He answers specific prayers. Not to say we don't, because sometimes we don't know what to pray or ask for, and the Bible even addresses that. That's where the Spirit comes in and helps us with that. Right. But as often as you can, if you're feeling disconnected or lonely or isolated, pray that God would send you somebody. Send you a friend, or at least send you someone that you can be a blessing to. I'll give an example for that. This was a time where I was spending a lot of time praying and fasting, and it never fails. When you draw close to the Lord with prayer and fasting, God always does incredible things, and we need to be doing more of that, especially in the times that we're living in. But I was on my way to church one Wednesday to go pray before service, and I was walking in, and I noticed out of my left eye there was a hand reaching up to me, and what it was, there was an Arctic entryway into the building, and this guy was reaching up, and he all he had to say was, "I need a friend." That's all he said, and the Lord, spoke to me that I needed to engage in conversation with him, and not just because I was on a mission, mm-hmm. And sometimes we miss the opportunities. Or even the answer to our prayer, sure. If we're not cautious and sensitive to the Lord, but He still calls me to this day, and we were able to be a tremendous blessing in His life, and God used him to be a tremendous blessing in our life and the local church. So,
yes, I liked your advice that you gave when you said to be the solution, because more than likely there is another young person that's thinking or feeling the same way, and maybe they're just waiting for someone else to be that solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure,
absolutely. Go ahead. Well, yeah, and it's the simple answer, but it's not the easy answer, mm-hmm. right?
Right.
And that's the way God is. God, sometimes the solution is not easy, but it is simple.
Sure.
And when the Bible tells us it's more blessed to give than to receive, God knows something about us. Mm-hmm. You want to sink into depression really fast. Get focused all on how you're feeling and all the things that I'm trying to be sensitive to, because I know there's a lot of hard cases out there. But really, at the center of all this, the answer is very simple. We need to get outside of ourselves and reach out to other people And it's in that I believe God meets us and gives us the grace to get through whatever we're going through.
Sure, absolutely. Brother Tim, I appreciate you taking the time to be on the show here today, and all of the advice that you were able to give. I'm sure that it will be a help and encouragement to someone that is watching this show today. And our prayer is that God will just use these things that's been said by all of our guests, to benefit them spiritually and help them to draw closer to the Lord. And
Amen.
I appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having me, Brother Josh. It was an honor.
Well, thanks, brother, for being here. God bless you. So it's very evident from the comments mentioned by our guest that a person can feel alone without actually being alone. You can have people in your life every day and still feel disconnected. But as Brother Tim said, your feeling is just a feeling. It's not your reality, because God is always with you. This brings us to our next discussion with our final guest of today's show, Amy Anders, the youth leader at the Zion Hill Church in Cleveland, Tennessee. Sister Amy, thank you for coming on the show and being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Brother Josh.
On today's show, we've been talking about isolation and feeling alone and disconnected in small youth groups. I brought you on the show today because you have a large youth group. And one thing that I've noticed through the years is that when a young person is introduced to a new youth group, it does not take long for them to decide whether or not they feel connected with the rest of the group. So my question for you today is, how important do you feel it is that we make new youth feel a part?
Brother Josh, I think it's very important that we make new youth feel welcome. I think their first service or their first youth event that they attend is going to determine whether they come back or not, whether they feel welcomed or not. So we want to make sure during those first moments that we certainly make them feel at home, in whether it be a youth event or church service.
So Sister Amy, what advice would you give the viewers today on how to make that new youth feel connected, feel a part of the group?
Brother Josh, I think it's important that we create in our youth groups an atmosphere of almost like a family. The old saying is, the family that prays together stays together. If we create that kind of atmosphere with our youth group, then when a new person comes in, the young people especially, they're not going to hesitate to welcome that new person into the youth group and try to form a bond there. It's important too, when they walk in the door, that we not have judgment against them. They may not be dressed according to what we think they should be dressed. They may be shy, they may be backward, but we've got to make sure that we not use judgment, but that we show compassion and care towards them and show them that we genuinely love them, because young people can tell when you don't love them. They can tell when you're fake. So it's important in those first moments that you show them the love of the Lord and that you truly welcome them into the youth group. And if you see your young people aren't speaking with them or forming a bond, encourage your young people. There's nothing wrong with that, to go and talk to that new youth. Or you go with them and talk to them and just make sure that they feel welcome.
Yes, Sister Amy, that's a testimony that I feel like I've heard many times, where people have said that they were won to the church by the love that was shown to them. Mm-hmm. And so I agree 100% with you that we need to show those new youth that come into our midst that we genuinely love them, because that love is powerful. That love is going to draw them and help them stick. Once again, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us here for a few minutes today on the show. God bless you, Sister Amy, and God bless all of you watching today.
It has been said that the only thing changing faster than technology is our culture. We, the young people of today, constantly find ourselves in a world spiraling out of control.
We face challenges, pressures, and worldly viewpoints that shake our faith in ways previously unimaginable. Thankfully, the ministry of the Victory Leaders Band and programming like Greater Things encourage us to press forward.
Would you pray for us? We need a spiritual awakening more now than ever before. And if God prompts your heart, would you consider giving a financial gift
to support this ministry. Your prayers and support make these programs possible and help spread the message of God's love to our generation.
While many youth may deal with loneliness and isolation, I recently read a Gallup poll that stated this percentage is much lower among youth who attend church. I believe this is attributed to the fact that God has a plan for each of our lives. For those of you watching today who feel alone, isolated, or even disconnected, the first step for rising above those feelings is to know that God has a plan for your life. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Greater Things. Since our first episode was released last month, we have received a lot of positive feedback, and we want to share some of that with you today. Tara from Canada says, "This is so great. I'm so excited. Glory to God. The VLBs in my church are going to love this." Jordan Goolsby from North Carolina says, "This is an awesome video. Can't wait to see the next episode." And Brenda Prince from England says, "To all involved in this awesome ministry, may God forever bless and inspire you. I thoroughly enjoyed that and have shared it in England. The possibilities are endless, the reach is extensive, and the concept is exciting. Looking forward to future episodes and to testimonies of the evangelical work done by this tool all over the world. Thank God and thank you." And we give God all the glory for every life that was touched by this. We would love to hear from you, so send us an email with your thoughts to gt@thechurchofgod.org or leave us a comment on our Facebook and Twitter feeds. Your feedback will help us to improve each episode, and we will know what topics are important to you. You can watch this and future episodes of Greater Things on our website, via our social media pages, or by subscribing to our podcast feeds on Apple's iTunes or Google's Play Store. Until next time, keep your eyes firmly set on Jesus and get ready to see Him perform greater things in your life.